Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Goin Digital Show, the podcast for K-12 school leaders. I'm your host, Greg Goins, a K-12 superintendent in the state of Illinois, and this is episode number 12, Lessons on Leadership. And in this episode, we're going to hear from leadership experts in K-12 education, higher education, and also the business world as we discuss the keys to successful leadership and what you can do to become a better school leader. I want to give a big hello to those watching live on the TeachCal Broadcasting Network at teachcal.com. If you would like to participate in the live broadcast, just use the EduLive hashtag. You can find great live education content every Tuesday and Wednesday night at the TeachCal website. You can also find the Goin Digital Show on YouTube, Stitcher Radio, and on YouTube, iTunes, where we've recently been recognized as a new and noteworthy podcast. So we want to thank all of our loyal listeners. So let's go ahead and kick things off with our very special guest. Beginning with Dr. Marcita Riley, a former K-12 superintendent in the state of Kansas, who's also a longtime mentor and leadership coach for school leaders. She's also author of the book, Coaching Conversations. We have Dr. Harvey Alvy, also a former K-12 administrator, who's a Professor Emeritus at Eastern Washington University. And Dr. Alvy is the author of several books, including one of my favorites, Learning from Lincoln, Leadership Practices for School Success. And we also have Dan Forbes, an executive coach and founder of the Lead with Giants community and social network. And Lead with Giants now has more than 42,000 followers on Twitter. So we're excited to learn a little bit more about the Lead with Giants platform. So we have all the bases covered tonight with K-12 education, higher ed, and the executive boardroom. So we're excited to have all of our guests. So thanks for being here.
Good. It's great to be here, Greg.
Yeah, well, we're thrilled to have you, and we want to learn all the tricks of the trade and all the things you're out talking to folks about when it comes to school leadership and leadership in general. So if we could, let's just go around the horn. Give us a little bit about your background and really kind of how you got into this line of work and helping different leaders. And we'll start with the ladies. So Marcita, if you can get things going, we'll get going here.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate this opportunity to be on your show. This is really great experience for me. So my background is, of course, education. I have a teacher's heart, and I've been a teacher since I was a kiddo playing teacher school, with my brothers and sisters. So I was an elementary teacher for about half of my career, and then I went into the administration. I have been an elementary principal, a central office person, assistant superintendent, and then I was superintendent, ended my public school career as a superintendent. And then I went into higher ed, so I was at the University of Kansas as a professor and as a researcher. And that's when I started my training as a leadership coach. Got into coaching, and now I've been certified with the International Coach Federation. Written a couple of books. One is, you mentioned, Coaching Conversations, Transforming Your School One Conversation at a Time. And then the second book is Opening the Door to Coaching Conversations. I think my area of really interest and my work with my clients is around how they show up as a school leader, how they show up as the principal of the school or the instructional team leader. And it's not about being an expert. It's really about building capacity in others and having that kind of a focus for their leadership. And I think that really makes powerful leadership, because you empower your staff. So that's sort of my message.
Great. Harvey?
Thank you, Greg. And Dan, Marcita, it's great to be on with you guys, too. And again, Greg, it's an honor to be on tonight, so I appreciate it. Anyway, I've had a great journey in education. I've been fortunate to teach every level from elementary school, middle school, high school, university, and graduate school. Started out teaching in Harlem and New York City, and my wife and I were fortunate to go overseas for many years, and we taught in international schools in Zaire, Africa, in New Delhi, in Israel, and our last post was I was a high school principal at Singapore American School. we came back to the States, and my goal was really to work with folks who were going to be principals, and I really have been honored to be able to do that the last 20 years or so. My specialization is really the newcomer to the principalship, and I've done a couple of books in that area and books on the principalship in general. And of course, as you mentioned, the Lincoln book, I'm one of those millions of folks around the world who's a Lincoln buff. And I've been really fortunate that when I started doing presentations for school leaders on Lincoln, it caught on, and that led to learning from Lincoln, where we were able to capture ideas from school leadership and from business, and use Lincoln's life to share examples on that. There have been quite a few books in business on Lincoln, so it was great for us to do one in education on Lincoln. And you know, for me, being a principal was a tremendous challenge. So I've really spent the last 20 plus years of my life reading about leadership, trying to do better as a school leader, and sharing that at the university. And it's a great opportunity again tonight to have a chance to talk about leadership.
Well, great. Dan.
Well, hello everybody. Thank you, Greg, for having me here this evening with Marcita and with Harvey. I guess I am the non-education career path guy. I have been unable to keep a job most of my life, and so I'll tell you my career path so that you'll understand that. For 20 years, I was a pastor. I was a minister and a counselor. So every week I was preaching and teaching my congregation. So I guess I have been a teacher all along. Then I say I went to the dark side. I went into business and turned to the real estate industry. Became a real estate broker, owned my own business in Florida, very successful in that business, primarily residential real estate, built a team. It was a boutique office. And I thought I would do that forever until the real estate crash of 2007 that just devastated our area market in Florida. Got hired by Merrill Lynch, became a financial advisor, and hired a couple of coaches to help me to start growing my business. And I had started doing that in real estate very early on, and had multiple coaches that helped me. And one of the best coaches I ever had really helped me to learn how to coach my team and those with whom I was working. So at Merrill Lynch, I started doing the same thing. I created a team. I led the development of our team and coached my team members, and found that my passion still throughout all of my life has been about making a difference in the lives of others, and I felt that coaching was really what I was best suited for to help other people. So it was back in 2012 that I launched Lead with Giants. I call myself an executive coach or a leadership coach, but I'm simply helping other people to find their best way forward personally and professionally. And we connected on Twitter, I believe, Greg, and I'm connected with a few people there. Happy to say more about the Lead with Giants community, but let me just leave that as my introduction. I reside in the great state of Texas. I was Florida-born, Floridian by birth, and Texan by choice. Moved here in 2014.
Well, great, and I'm really excited about this conversation as a school leader myself. And we all know that leadership comes in all shapes and sizes, but I guess just to kick things off tonight, I'll kind of start with a softball question for the panel. But who or what has been the greatest influence on you as you have been out helping other leaders? Are there books that really resonated with you, or did you have mentors yourself? And we could just kind of go around the horn again, Marcita.
Okay. I think I've had many mentors, of course, in my life, in my career, and there are two that really stand out. One was the assistant superintendent gave me my first job as a principal, and he had so much influence on the entire district, and yet he was a very quiet, man, he wasn't the typical way you think of a leader, but he was the kind of leader that empowered other people. He listened, he encouraged, he guided, and he showed me how to be a really great leader. And in my higher ed, when I was doing my doctoral work, it was my advisor, and he was one who once again opened lots of doors for me. I had to but he had a wide network, so he taught me how important the network is, and introducing people to opportunities. So those were two really great mentors and guides that I had in my career.
Great. Harvey, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to go with just three quick ones here. I'm actually going to start with my mother.
Good call.
She was very, very positive. Actually, she was a teacher's aide for many, many years, and she used to say to folks, "You're the best." And we all grew up with that. And even though there were times that I probably didn't deserve to hear "You're the best," we still heard it. And she actually had quite an influence on other folks. But we talk about in leadership theory X and theory Y, McGregor's famous theory, and the theory Y part is, of course, that you believe people are good and they should be supported and motivated. I got that from her. Also, my first principal, Lionel McMurrin, he was a great leader. We were at the Frederick Douglass School in Harlem, and the school had just opened, and Lionel had a tremendous amount of patience. In fact, whenever I write a book on the principalship, Lionel is the first person I always recognize. And because he did such a great job, I thought leadership was easy until I had a principal who wasn't that good, and we saw how that really hurt the morale of the school. And so he was really a great leader, set a great example, personal example. And not surprisingly, and I don't have to go into details about it, but Lincoln had a tremendous influence on what I've become the last 20 or 30 years. And I'll just mention a real small thing, and that is the perseverance, and how he persevered through so much in his life and had only 1 year of education. So that it's an inspiration just to read about him. So I would go with those three.
Great. Dan?
Yeah, I love hearing these answers. I would say that there was one person that had a tremendous leadership influence on me above all others, and it was the president of the college that I went to, which was Tennessee Temple University in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And his name was Lee Robertson, and if I heard him say it once, I heard him say it 1,000 times during those years, and it was, everything rises and falls on leadership. He was a great pastor, built a very large church and a great school, an institution that continues his legacy. But hearing those words over and over and over again, everything rises and falls on leadership, was a tremendous reminder to me of the responsibility that leaders have, because it's not only about self, but it's about others. And so he was a tremendous influence. And then I would say in the most recent years, the Lead with Giants community, which is a social media community, but it's also the name of my company. But that title, Lead with Giants, came from or was inspired by a quote of Isaac Newton, who said, "If I've seen further than others, it's because I was standing on the shoulder of giants." And I have met in the Lead with Giants social media community people from so many places in the world, and I can think of connections and contacts now that I have with just people who love leadership, CEOs of companies, company executives, leadership coaches and consultants, secretaries, a lot of people in education, from the U.S. to Canada to Australia to the Middle East to Africa to the UK, almost any continent, I've been able to connect and engage and have conversations with people who love leadership. And I probably have learned as much about leadership engaging with those people than I ever learned in college and maybe even in my practice of leadership. So really my life and what I'm doing now is sort of a fulfillment of that quote of Isaac Newton, because I realize that I stand on the shoulder of others.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. And you know, as we think about this person that is going to be the ideal leader, whether it's in a school system or the leader of a church, or you know, we just talked about the fact that leadership comes in all shapes and sizes. To the three of you, what makes an effective leader? What are the characteristics that a leader needs to be successful? Do you believe in this notion that people are born leaders, or can you actually teach leadership? And Harvey, I'll jump to you for that.
Yeah, let me answer the second question first, and I do think there are some characteristics that make a difference, but you could definitely learn a lot. There's no doubt about it. I mean, in my own situation, when I went to the university the first time around and then went back to the principalship, there were some things I learned along the way that helped me afterwards. So I think it's a combination of both. But to answer your question, you know, what makes a great leader? I mean, I really believe that character is destiny. And I think the first thing that's really critical is the personal example that you set every day on the job. And so as much as it's important to have technical skills, like in school leadership, of course, you need to know curriculum, you need to know assessment, you need to know instruction. There's no doubt that who you are as an individual makes a tremendous difference. If people believe in you, you'll have more credibility. The opportunity to be involved in change is going to occur more. The possibility is going to be there if people believe in you. So I do think that character is destiny, and personal example is very, very important. So that's why, Greg, when you ask is you know, you're born with it or not, personal example is tricky on that particular piece. I also think that really effective leaders combine human relation skills with technical skills. It's said in the book The Extraordinary Leader, they talk about how, you know, you're hired for your technical skills, but you're fired for a lack of interpersonal skills. So I do think it's a combination. I also think another important combination is leadership and management. So when in the Principal's Companion, when we say the instructional leader also makes sure the lights are working, you know, it's leadership and management go hand in hand. I'm not one of those folks that believe that management is kind of a second-tier thing. I really think they go together. I think another critical piece in terms of effective leadership is visibility. You need to know what's going on in the organization. You need to be visible. And where you spend your time is very important. Ken Peterson, he's actually Professor Emeritus now too at University of Wisconsin. He talks about what you pay attention to and spend time on communicates what you value. What you pay attention to and spend time on. So I think visibility is a critical piece. Balancing leadership and management, technical skills, and as I said, also having that human relations piece. But at the end of the day, character is very, very important, and I don't think you can underestimate that.
And Dan, I would guess that you would take the position that leadership skills can be taught in what you're doing with the Lead with Giants organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people are born with certain talents that may make a path towards leadership a little bit easier for them. But no, I don't believe anyone is born a born leader. I think any leader could reflect upon a lot of things. And as we were just telling stories about mentors or others who have influenced us, any good leader would tell some similar story. To me, leadership is about uplifting other people. And so one of the themes of Lead with Giants is uplifting leadership. And we have a vision of raising up 10,000 uplifting leaders. And the way you become an uplifting leader is you go to leadwithgiants.com and you click the tab that says Pledge, and you read about it, and you check a box that says, I pledge to be that kind of leader. And it's just a way of furthering a style of leadership. I mean, we have enough leadership that is disappointing and disempowering and creates a lot of disengagement. But when I speak about uplifting leadership, I'm speaking about four things: leadership that is inspirational, aspirational, intentional, and purposeful. And by inspirational, I would tell anybody, you are a leader. I don't care if you're the CEO or if you're in a cubicle. If you are a stay-at-home mom, you are a leader, because leadership is about influence, and you are influencing others. And along with that, you don't need a title to be a leader. It's not a title, a job title, that makes someone a leader. Aspirational is about the fact that no matter how good a leader you are, you can become a better leader, and hopefully you are a leader who wants to become a better leader. And then intentional is about serving others, and to me, to lead is to serve. And then that fourth word, purposeful, is about serving a purpose higher than self, and that can be a cause, that can be a company who's committed to a product or service. It could be an educational leader who is there to serve students and staff, or to serve the world. But uplifting leadership is something that I love to talk about.
Great. Marcita?
Boy, this is, I can connect with much of what both Harvey and Dan have said. I believe that leadership is an activity, not a position. So Dan, I'm right there in your camp with you. No matter where you are on the organizational chart, you can exert leadership. It's about how you show up. It's about, instead of complaining about, well, if only the principal would do so-and-so, if only she'd do this or that, you step up to change the conversation into something that is productive rather than sucking the life out of the task. It starts with people knowing themselves well. Both Dan and Harvey talked about that. Knowing what their strengths, what your own strengths are, what your values are, what your beliefs are, and leading with that no matter where it is. So it's about showing up more than saying the right thing or being calculating about how to roll out some new idea. Leadership is about collaborating with others, listening deeply to others about what they care about what are their concerns, and then having deep conversations, instigating conversations about those big ideas. Well, what can our group do about this? What can our third grade teacher team do about this problem we have in all of our classes with this student problem, for instance? So really collaborating and not thinking that everybody has to do, that you're in charge. It's about building capacity in a town, and so in our schools, they if they're good at something, they think everybody's good at it, and they don't realize that that's a uniqueness, that's a gift they have. And so just saying to a teacher, you know, you're really good at engaging kids in this tough math stuff, it helps them know what they do well and know what their strengths are and their gifts are. And then finally, I think the way you really become an influencer is to be fully present in your interactions with others. So that means really listening, asking questions that take somebody further, like Harvey said, he had a mentor who was really great. Well, what did that mentor do that really made him great? So that you as the leader or the principal or whatever it is, have to be curious, and you have to really be interested in other people and then listen to what they say and respond to that. And the counterintuitive thing that occurs is that when you focus on other people, they begin to attribute you as having great knowledge and expertise, which of course you don't have. You were just pulling out of them the things that they know. One of the best evaluations that teachers, really great teachers, have is when a principal simply says, you know, you really do a good job with these kids who are struggling. What is it that you do that, how do you plan the lesson like that? What kinds of things go on in your head? Because so much of what the teacher is doing is intuitive. And they're doing it well, and their class is running smoothly, but they don't really realize how brilliant that is compared to what other teachers struggle with. So they get really smart about what they're doing themselves. It becomes not just intuitive, but also you take them from the art into the science of it so that they can replicate it, so that they even understand better what they're doing. So.
And I think those are great points. And, you know, as someone that's been in a leadership position now, 14 years as a superintendent and 2 additional years as a high school principal, I've always been amazed at the public perception or stereotypes, if you will, of what leaders are supposed to do. We're supposed to have all the answers because we sit in the big office and have the fancy chair and the business card. But not only you learn very quickly. Not only do you not have all the answers, you're still trying to figure out the right questions.
That's exactly right.
So, Dan, what do you think some of the biggest challenges are in working with particularly young leaders?
Well, I think you sort of alluded to one there, and that is the mistake that a lot of people make of thinking that being the leader means being the person that has all the answers. And really, to me, being a leader is the person that has learned that they don't have all the answers, and that sometimes leadership is having the best questions. And along with that, I say a companion with that is that you know, many people think that it's a mistake or it's a weakness to say I made a mistake or I was wrong. If you've been watching our presidential debates, I don't think I've heard anyone, and it doesn't matter which party maybe that you're watching, I don't think I've heard anyone say, you know, I made a mistake. We learn from our mistakes, and trying to avoid mistakes or prevent mistakes just really makes us dumber. So I think a good leader is someone that's open, someone that's able to say, I've made a mistake, and to turn those mistakes and or the mistakes of those that they are leading as well into key learning moments, rather than feeling like they are a failure or making other people think that they're a failure because they made a mistake.
Harvey?
Well, you know, on the issue of what's appropriate in terms of mistakes, and it kind of picks up on what Dan and Marcetta were saying, is being a lifetime learner is really critical. And when you become the school principal, you know you've been selected over other folks, and you may think, well, look, I've got this position, I must know what I'm doing. Well, you're going to find out the very first day that something will happen on the very first day that you never received training for at the university. And it's interesting when we look at the research on you know, what you learn in the job and what you learn when you take your courses, whether it's law or education or whatever. About 80% we learn on the job. And so being a lifetime learner, I mean, it's one of the first pieces of advice I give to new leaders. You have to be a lifetime learner. You have to recognize a point that Dan made earlier about serving. That's, you know, you never should say in administration that I moved up to the principalship, for example, because you can't move up from being a teacher. Teaching is a sacred position. It's a calling. And when we're in positions of leadership, it's really important that we realize it's our job, of course, to serve the students and to serve the teachers. One of my big mistakes, Greg, to get back to your question, was when I became a principal, I was so concerned about serving the students that I really forgot about the teachers my first year in terms of professional development. So I think being a lifetime learner is, I can't overstate that as a critical point.
Marcita?
When I'm working with people who are aspiring to be in a leadership role or who are in, the first year in their role, the thing that I really work with them, there's three things. One is, what is it that they believe? What is it that they want? What is their vision for their school? I find that so many people that come out of our university programs have been so busy moving up in their career, they've been looking to other people and doing what everybody else said they should do to get to that position. And they haven't taken time to say, well, what is it that I believe? What is it? What kind of school, what kind of legacy do I want to leave at this school? So working with them on that issue. So finding out who they are, not just what other people think is important. And secondly, it would be both Harvey and Dan talked about this, not worrying about trying to be the expert. Brene Brown in her books, about Daring Greatly, really talks about that vulnerability. And I find that new faculty often, if you are willing to make yourself vulnerable or show your vulnerability, like this is the first time I've had a whole assembly and I'm really nervous about it. The faculty is can be very gentle with you. I mean, they can really help you and support you in that. And then the third thing is to always assume positive intent with your staff. So if somebody makes a mistake, don't assume they did it intentionally. And if you dig deeply, you can often figure out, you often learn that the reason they did something that you think was really stupid is, from their point of view, it was a good idea. They just didn't know or think about it from your vantage point. So assume positive intent and people will respond well to any comments or feedback that you give them that might be negative. So.
And we always talk about different leadership styles, and we could talk for another hour about all the different theories and all the different styles of leadership. I talk with my people a lot in my district, my principals that I work with, to be a collaborative leader, and to try to find a way to build relationships and try to find a way to build trust. Whenever you work with someone, again, maybe a young leader, do you try to steer them toward a specific leadership style, or is every different person a unique individual that will find their own way? Harvey, what do you think about that?
Yeah, let me to answer that. Let me pick up on what Marcetta just said about the know thyself. I mean, I think the first thing before we get into the whole style piece, and it's a great question, Greg, is to begin with who you are, because if you know who you are, that helps a little bit about styles to some extent. I mean, if you're not the kind of person that really loves to, that is not totally into data all the time, then maybe it moves you away from a particular style of leadership. I guess I would say, Greg, I think situational leadership is really important. I mean, we could talk about charismatic leadership, we could talk about servant leadership, we could talk about theory X, theory Y, we could talk about transformational leadership. I could go on and on and on, instructional leadership. But I do think that situational leadership is really important in the sense that you need to pay attention to what's going on. So when I talked about visibility earlier, for example, that's so important to have a feel for it. Not to micromanage necessarily, but to have a feel for it. I do think, as Dan was talking before, I think servant leadership is really important. I think it's critical that what we do as leaders, that we help other people who become our assistant principals or teachers, department chairs or whatever, that that we could say towards the end of our career, you know, many people that I worked with went on and became principals or superintendents. So part of that is really critical. For me personally, transformational leadership, Greg, is very, very important. I was very influenced by that whole notion of, you know, helping people be the best that they could be. And so that's been a big part of my career. But, you know, in the 3 schools where I was principal, each school took a different kind of leader to some extent. So I think at the end of the day that situational leadership is really important, but I wouldn't hang my hat on one particular style.
Dan, what are your thoughts?
What was the question again?
We're basically talking about leadership styles, and do you
Right.
steer people toward, I guess you also look at the personality of the individual and try to figure out maybe the best path for them in terms of leadership styles.
Right. Yeah, I agree with what Marcita said earlier about coaching people to lead from their strengths and their values above all things, and to become aware of various styles of leadership and how and when they might apply. Now, every person may have their what they might, you know, self-described as their style of leadership. For me, it's uplifting leadership, and you're not going to read about that in a textbook. I made it up, and I described it. That's my style of leadership. Transformational leadership, you know, a more formal theory and been described. You can Google it. You can find it. Servant leadership, and but you know, leadership that isn't transformational, you know, I don't even know if that's leadership. And to me, leadership, it has to be about serving other people, or that's not leadership either. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, in the Lead with Giants social media community, so we have a fellow there who is retired from the Canadian military. Now, he can be an all-business kind of guy, but he also has a great wit and a great humor. And whenever someone mentions command and control style of leadership in a negative way, he'll jump in often and say, wait a minute, there are times that you really need a command and control type of leader. Now, he's been out on the battlefield where the missiles are flying, and so obviously you want a command and control leader there. If the building's on fire, you don't want firemen showing up and forming a committee to get a consensus about what to do. You want someone giving orders and providing direction. So to me, leadership style, understand the different styles, understand what they might come to play, and lead with your strengths based upon your values.
Very good. Marcita?
Well, I guess I believe that leadership is less of style and more of what's authentic for you. I think you lose credibility when you don't know yourself well and you try to be something or someone you're not. So it goes back to knowing yourself well. And yes, sometimes you have to be very directive, but in general, if you aren't a directive kind of person and then you try to be, it comes off. It really does the opposite. Instead of influencing others, it really pushes others away. So I think the most important thing in this thing is to say, how do I want to? What kind of a person do I want to be in this situation? Do I want to be one that, if it's a fire, do I want to be one that people feel safe with because it's like I know what to do. I'm going to get people out the door. So then you show up as that kind of a person. And in normal circumstances, I think there's several skills that go across all of those styles of leadership, and that is to be a good listener, to really ask good questions, and to give and to assume positive intent. And if you do those kinds, if you have that kind of skill set, you can use it, and then assess, I think both the gentlemen said, assess what the situation is calling for me to be. But always lead from your authentic self, not trying to be something you aren't.
Great point. If we could, I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to really ask questions to all three of you individually about a variety of different topics. So, Dan, I want to start with you. And you know what? This is a different time. We talked a little bit before we came on air that you and I actually connected on Twitter. So we're throwing this term around a lot, 21st century leader. What does that actually mean, and how has leadership changed as we're into a new generation of leaders?
Well, that's a stumper. I don't know that I really thought about that question. So, how is the 21st century leader different? Well, I think that we as a society continue to grow and evolve, and as Harvey said earlier, that it's important for a leader to keep learning. So, we see our society move from the industrial age to the technological age. I think that from millennials to baby boomers that might still be working, that we are seeing more of a hunger or thirst for collaborative leadership, for being included in setting the vision and the mission of an organization, and people want to feel like they belong to something that is really making a difference. And I think that those are some of the key characteristics of 21st century leadership, realizing that we continue to evolve. Leadership has to evolve as well along the way.
And Harvey, even though we're talking about 21st century leaders, in your book, I mean, we're going back, 17th, 18th century, 19th century, talking about Lincoln, and a lot of the principles that were still very much a guiding light to being a successful leader today. Can you just talk a little bit about your admiration for Lincoln and his leadership style?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the 21st century bit, because oftentimes when we do presentations on Lincoln, we talk about what does a 19th century leader have to tell us in the 21st century. And I would say core values. Lincoln's, whether you're a 21st century leader, 19th century leader, core values are really important. And Lincoln's core value, that all should have an equal chance. The rest of his life was really all about that. And when he visited the Independence Hall in Philadelphia on his way to Washington when he was elected president, he was so touched by Independence Hall because that's where the Declaration was written, and that's where they talked about all men are created equal, and all the phrase that he used, that all should have an equal chance. So I think core values is really, really critical, and that permeates any time period. Another thing is perseverance. Lincoln persevered through tremendous tragedy throughout his whole life, and then of course dealing with the Civil War. And you would never equate the principalship with what Lincoln had to deal with, but the idea of persevering. The other thing that's really important, Dan had mentioned mission and vision. For Lincoln, the mission of unifying the country was his goal in 1861. That was the mission. However, when he saw after a couple of years that it wasn't really working, he decided to go beyond his original intent, because he realized that slavery had to end. And although he wanted in the beginning of the war to keep the country together, and was willing to give up on the idea of emancipation, by 1863 he said, you know what, the mission has to be changed a little bit. So I think the phrase where the Lincoln uses at the end of 1862, the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate for the stormy present. That's one of the best statements you'll ever hear on change. The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. He said that right before emancipation. So I think, Greg, the last point I would make on that is the idea that even though you're on a mission for 21st century, sometimes the mission has to change. I mean, as a nation, we changed how we handle things after 9/11. And so you have a mission, but you have to be willing to change a bit. So those are three things that I would mention.
You know, Harvey brings up a good point there about principles. So really, leadership principles, I don't care how far you go back, the principles of leadership really don't change. John Maxwell says, policies are many, principles are few. Policies will change, principles never do. Mm-hmm. So core values, principles of leadership, I don't care what century you're in, you're going to find that most of the common principles of leadership are still relevant.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I think in what you're both saying is the difference now in the 21st century is really that our students are different. Their family configurations are quite different than they were in the 18th century, 19th century. And your leadership has to respond to those differences that arise, but the skills, the basic skills of really great leadership sort of stay the same.
And Marcita, I want to stay with you. As a former school superintendent yourself, in my opinion, I think that's one of the most difficult jobs, leadership positions you can be in, because you have to juggle so many different groups of people. Not only are you working with board members, you're working with community members, you're working with teachers, you're working with non-certified staff members. You're also working with your administrative colleagues, not only in your district, but maybe in your region. And, I mean, there's a lot to juggle. So if you think back to your experience as a school superintendent, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced, and what were some of the strategies you used to be successful?
Well, handling the people was the biggest challenge. You have great people, and really building relationships with people so that they trust you. In my school district, it was two small rural communities and the Prairie Band Potawatomi Reservation. And when I stepped into the role, the Native American, they were probably 25% of our population, of student population, and they were really invisible in the community. I mean, the families were invisible. We were actually educating. Our students was the first generation of students who were being homeschooled in the place where they lived. Their parents had all been sent to residential schools. And so what our staff didn't understand was they had expectations of, well, they should show up to parent-teacher conferences. They didn't show up to parent-teacher conferences. They didn't, they had no, but when you thought about it, this is the first generation of parents who had kids in school. So anyway, it was really working. I think that's, again, the response that you get. It's what makes a great leader, a good leader from a great leader. I spent lots and lots and lots of time just slowly building trust and rapport that had been diminished in many years of previous. And it took a long time to build that trust and rapport, but that's the thing that really helped calm the community, bring the community together, and see see the reservation as an asset. So anyway, it was. I go back to in that situation, it was really important that I didn't come in as the great white woman who knew it all, because that was what they had seen for every previous leadership group. And of course I didn't have any trouble coming in as not knowing it, because I didn't know much. it actually became a real asset. It was a real strength, and it helped build the linkages that really changed the tenor. It changed how our community came together around the schools instead of being divided.
And you know, I think one of the things that's changed a little bit from a leadership perspective, and we talked about this with the 21st century question, is there are more and more leaders that are gravitating toward this idea of going out and getting a leadership coach, which a lot of you I know are doing actively. What do you do as a leadership coach? What could I expect if I was going to work with one of you? And I'll start with Dan on that.
Well, I recently came across a great quote that I think that it answers that question. I have it up here on the wall behind me, and it's by Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "Our chief want is someone who will inspire us to be what we know we could be." And I don't claim to necessarily be a great inspiration to people, but my best clients are those that have a vision or goal of who they want to be or what they want to accomplish. And I tell them, look, you can do all of that all by yourself. Today you're at point A, you have this vision of point B. I believe that you're more than capable of getting there all by yourself. I believe in you. But I also believe that if you work with me as your coach, that I'm going to help accelerate your progress and help to smooth out the speed bumps and avoid maybe some potholes along the way. So as a coach, I enter into a partnership with clients, and I walk along beside them on their journey. It's not about my journey. It's not that I have a bag of tricks that I'm going to treat them, nor am I the answer man. Just like Marcita was saying a moment ago. I have no problem telling people, I don't know, but I also know that you and I together can figure this out. We can find the way. So to me, those who turn to coaching have that mindset. I also like to say that my best clients are not people who need a coach, but they are people who want a coach. They want to learn. They want to grow. They have an aspiration to lead better. And that's why coaching works.
Marcita?
Well, I totally agree with what Dan said. I think in addition, what a coach does when they partner with you is that they'll give you a trusted outside perspective. And I tell you, when you are in either a principal role or a superintendent role, it's a very lonely place. I mean, you said it, Greg. You sometimes it's very difficult to really let your fears, your vulnerabilities show up. And so this is somebody that you can really be your authentic self and experiment with, at least thinking through situations so that you feel like when you take the step or the action that you've really had somebody help you think it through so that it has the best chance of having the effect you want it to have. So really it's being a thinking partner, having a trusted person that's outside the system that you can really just be yourself, and we help you go deeper into what's going to work and what you truly will be best action for you to take.
And Harvey, I know that you go out and you do a lot of public speaking and presenting different workshops, and I know you did that a lot with your Lincoln book. what are some of the questions that you get from people that attend those sessions, and just kind of share some of the dialogue with that experience.
What happens very often is Lincoln's work is so inspirational. So it really, what happens very often is folks will say, well, where should I start? What could I go back with? And just to give you an example on the types of questions, they'll ask, so what's a document that I could use to kind of share what you're saying? And I actually say, well, take the Gettysburg Address back to your faculty. There's a great example of not using jargon. One of Lincoln's great assets was his ability to articulate for the everyday person. And that's a really critical point, that in leadership there's so much jargon in education that we all know about, and I'm sure it's the same thing in business, Dan, and it's so important to get beyond that. Another thing we often hear is what you had offered earlier, Greg, when you say, how does this apply to the 21st century? And I go back to the mission and vision piece. And I don't believe the mission and vision is something that you just write and gathers dust in a drawer. That mission and vision really does make a big difference. And Lincoln's life is an example of that. And you also, I get common questions about, was he really depressed? Is that true? And I say yes, it was absolutely true. And that's where the perseverance really comes in. Each time he would overcome it because he wanted to make a difference. He wanted to make a contribution, just like school leaders want to make a contribution. So the issue of depression comes up actually quite a bit, and overcoming difficulties and perseverance. I can't state how important that is.
And I was just in Springfield, Illinois this morning. I was coming back to my office this afternoon. I'd been attending a meeting, and if you're ever in Springfield, you need to take advantage of all the Lincoln sites, the Lincoln Library, Museum, Lincoln's Tomb. There's just so much great history there, and I'm certainly proud to be an Illinoisan and have the Lincoln legacy here in our state. As we come to the end of the hour, I guess the last question that I want to ask, what advice can the three of you give to either young leaders or new leaders? And then let's also take an opportunity with that question to tell us where we can find you. Maybe there are people out there that want to contact you and learn more about what you can offer in terms of leadership coaching and mentoring. So part one would be just a little advice for a new leader, and then where we can find you. And we'll start with Dan.
To the new leader, I'd say don't wait for the call to leadership. And that is looking to that next level, or thinking that leadership is a position or a title, but simply step into leadership, choose leadership, find a need or find a problem, and then find the way that you can become the solution or lead through that problem. So don't wait for the call to leadership. Go ahead and decide and choose to be the leader that solves that problem. There's two websites that I'd like to direct people to. One is leadwithgiants.com. So if you're interested in social media, if you're interested in joining a lot of educational leaders, our tweet chat on Mondays, 6 p.m. Central Time, has a lot of educational leaders there. But leadwithgiants.com, there's a large navigational tab that says Join, and that'll show you how to connect, if you would like, to our LinkedIn group, our Google Plus group, our Facebook group, or the tweet chat. Then for professional coaching services or to learn more about what I do as an executive coach or a leadership coach, the other website is leadwithgiantscoaching.com. As you can tell, I don't have much of an imagination for coming up with names. So leadwithgiants.com, leadwithgiantscoaching.com, in all of social media, on all of my websites. My email is there, my phone number is there. It's very easy to find out how to contact me. I'm happy to have one-on-one consultations, conversations by phone, online, with no charge, of course, to individuals. I really have a desire to help people to make a difference. Thanks, Greg, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Let's go to Harvey.
I'll mention just a few items that I think are really important for folks to keep in mind. First of all, the mission and vision piece that we've talked about quite a bit. In education in particular, the mission and vision is always about what's best for students, and to always start out with that, and to go from there. What is best for students, and then of course your own personal mission and vision, and especially for new folks that you asked. One thing we know about newcomers is that a lot of the habits that you develop in the beginning, sometimes it's difficult to get away from that. So it's really important in the first year in the principalship that you celebrate the classroom. You get into the classroom, you show that you're visible. And as I said earlier, where you spend your time sends a powerful message. So visibility, getting out of the office. Another thing that's critical for newcomers is to honor the culture. Earlier when Marcelo talked about the importance of building trust. So honor the culture, get to know the culture, build the trust before jumping in. And then finally, I'll mention Harry Truman's idea of the buck stops here. If you accept that notion that the buck stops here, you won't be frustrated by all the things that take place in the school that you really weren't responsible for. If you go in with the notion that you are responsible, regardless if it was some mistake a teacher made somewhere, it really helps to not feel frustrated. So saying that the buck stops with you is important. To get in touch with me, the best way is to just use my email address at the university, which is simply halvy, Halvy, at EWU for Eastern Washington University at EDU. And again, I'll echo what Dan said. It's been great to be on with Dan, Marcel, and Greg. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And where can we get the book?
Learning from Lincoln, ASCD has the book, Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development. They just go with ASCD. So if you go Learning from Lincoln, ASCD, and it is on Amazon too.
Great.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Marcita.
Hi. Well, I think my advice to new people, aspiring people, is to learn yourself well, to learn about what your values and beliefs are. I mean, I've said that several times. I mean, all of us have said that. I think it's really important to be authentic, to not try to be something you aren't, or that somebody else did well but isn't you. And finally, to learn to be a good listener, because I think if you're a good listener, it really builds trust and rapport, and you don't have to do anything or show anything. You're just a good listener, and you're curious about asking questions of other people. So the best way to build relationships is to really focus on the other person. And to get hold of me, you go to my website, and that is http with all those little things, and then just marcitariley.com. marcitariley.com. And I'd love to have them come to my website. I sign up for my blog. I have a couple of books that, of course, are from Amazon, so they can get that. And I really appreciate it. It's been a great opportunity to be with Dan and Alvy. It's been a great discussion, Greg. I appreciate being invited to be part of the panel.
Well, thank you so much to all of you. I think it's been an amazing conversation, and I hope this conversation not only helps school leaders, but anyone out there that may be embarking on a new leadership position. Keep in mind that you can watch this episode or listen to this episode on demand. This is episode number 12, Lessons on Leadership. You can find it on YouTube, Stitcher Radio, and on iTunes. So you want to try to check that out, and be sure to connect with all of our guests here tonight. And that's a wrap for this episode of the Going Digital Show. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon.
Thanks, Greg.